And we are proud to say that Mr. Goel graduated from FMS in 1996. He is the chairman and founder of Digit Insurance, a new age general insurance company that's on a mission to simplify insurance. Within just 3 years of operations, Digit has won the title of the General Insurance Company of the Year in Asia two times. Recently, it has also joined the Unicorn Club with a valuation of 1.9 billion US dollars. I think there must be some mistake. It must be 2 billion US dollars, isn't it? Calculation mistake. Kamesh is an insurance veteran with over 30 plus years of experience across markets including APAC, Middle East, and Northern Africa regions. He has worked in both general insurance and life insurance spaces and is seen as a thought leader for the industry. He graduated in science from St. Stephen's, Delhi, followed by a degree in law from Delhi University, uh, the day program. He completed his MBA from FMS Delhi in 1996. As I said, Kamesh has been a great friend of FMS. I still remember a day when I called him up. He was in Alliance that I need your help. That there is a candidate who is PWD candidate, and we want that she should be considered for a job position in Alliance. And he went all the way to ensure that that young girl is employed with Alliance. So Kamesh, thank you once again for being with FMS all the time. We welcome Kamesh you to FMS, to FMSAA, and we are very proud of the achievements that uh, are under your name, and we are so glad that FMS has contributed first unicorn of year 2021. And welcome to the webinar. The webinar is going to be hosted by Mr. Johib Khan, again a graduate of FMS, who is right now CEO of Valegra, APJ Sky and Suvan Group, and also leads the education division of the APJ Group. He will be hosting the webinar. Uh, he is ably assisted by Mr. Nitin Gupta as moderator, once again FMS graduate, and Dheeraj Jain, moderator, once again FMS graduate. We welcome all of you, all the participants, particularly faculty members, and also my batchmates to this webinar. And let's hope we also learn how to create a unicorn. Whether we're able to create or not is a different story altogether. At least we will know how to do it, how Kamesh did it. Uh, Over to you, Joheb. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, sir. Good evening, everyone. We are very fortunate to have Mr. Kamesh Goel with us today. As in all our webinars, if you have any queries, you can post them on the chat by using the Q&A button, and you can also raise hands if required. Mr. Kamesh, we have all been crowdsourcing questions before we reached out to you, and one of the first questions which we wanted to get an understanding from you was to understand for the benefit of our audience about your journey, right from your student days at FMS to building the first unicorn of 2021.
Thanks, Zoeb, and thanks a lot, sir, for a very nice and warm introduction. I think FMS has been a very fascinating time for me, and I think it probably would come for some of you as a surprise that in the first semester, I had made two very close friends in FMS. One was Randeep and one was Deepak Sahani. And these were the two guys who would in a way keep pushing me. But when the first semester result came, it said that failed in aggregate for me. and we didn't really understand what the result is. And then I remember going to the office, and then they explained that I have passed all the papers, all the 5 papers, but I have failed to get 50% in aggregate. So in a way, I can move to the next year, but I'll have to change, repeat in some subjects to get here. And I think I was almost on the verge of leaving it because I said, look, I can't really do this, too much of work. But I think these two friends, they ensured that for the next 2.5 years, they really helped me to continue. And I would say I owe my degree to them. Interestingly, while I was in a dire situation myself from that perspective, but there were others. I think a friend reached out when this webinar talk went. His name is Sanjeev Ahuja. He's an IS officer now in Parliament, deputed to Parliament, and he reached out to me saying that, "Do you remember me? You helped me a lot in my exams." So we were just laughing that there's never a hopeless situation in life. I think, well, I thought I'm in a hopeless situation, but I guess some others were dependent on me. So I think we had a bit of a fun for this webinar, for which I'm really thankful for. So I think when I joined FMS, I had already been working for about 5 years in the insurance sector, and that again was an entry by accident. But the sector was very fascinating in terms of the number of people one would interact with, different corporate clients and the retail business. At that time, I would say, and even now to a large extent, awareness of insurance in our country is really poor. But when you think of any natural catastrophe, a flood or an earthquake, or recently this COVID, insurance company play a very big role in bringing the economy back to where it is. So very fascinating, but the sector was nationalized. So from a career perspective, maybe people felt that it is not really a great place to be in. And then I think the sector opened up in 1999. And when the sector opened up, you obviously need people with insurance background. And that is where I would say the journey started. I used to work for about a couple of years in KPMG Consulting, and Allianz, which is maybe the largest insurance group in the world, was a client of KPMG. And just before the sector opened, I ended up joining Allianz, became part of the startup team, then became CEO of the general insurance, and then the journey started. Directly or indirectly, I worked in more than 70 countries across the world over the next 16 years across, I would say, 3 continents where I was based, and learned a lot, I would say, in this journey. And somewhere in 2015, I would say 14, 15, one started hearing about and learning as to what some of the new companies were trying to do on the insurance front. And my direct boss at that time, who's now the global CEO of Allianz, we used to always discuss that, no, should one do this inside the group or outside if you want to do something which is different. And then I think this idea of doing something new or a startup again really born in the mind. And Prem Vatsa, who's founder and chairman of the Fairfax Group, based out of Canada. I had known him for a long time. We had never worked together, but he was someone who was always telling me that you should do something on your own, and we'll invest. And again, I had a lot of colleagues who had worked. We had worked together in Bajaj Allianz, and a lot of them would also encourage me and say, "Look, I think there is a scope to do something different." So I had an investor. I think we had a decent idea of what we wanted to do, and most importantly, had a great team. 6, 7 people who were also ready to to do something different, and all of them were doing very well in their own careers. And that is how this, I would say, the journey of Digit Insurance really started.
Okay, thank you for walking us through, and you have publicly acknowledged the role that your friends have played in the webinar. So if they are part of the webinar, I'm pretty sure they'll be quite glad. One question which we have got from a couple of people, including Chirag and Achal and Achin, is when and how did you decide to start Digit? And what motivated you, knowing that, obviously you were part of Alliance, and before that also you had worked in insurance for a long, long time. So you knew that the existing players are quite strong. It is not a easy market to go in and, build a company and a brand where trust is more important. So can you take us through your journey as to how you decide to fight these incumbents?
Sure. So I would say I think two, three things here. One is that while the brand names are very big, and one has to keep that in mind. But I had left India in about 2010, late 2010, and when I moved back after about 6 years, though I'll keep visiting, uh, I and our team felt that nothing has really changed in the last 6 years. I think we knew the business inside out in terms of what the challenges are. We had done first startup. So somehow, I would say it never really struck us that competing in this would actually be difficult. I think we never really doubted that. All of us know that whenever you do anything, you would have ups and downs. But let me just say two, three concrete things what we did before we started. So we had actually three basic principles. The first was that we would only enter the segments or lines of business where we can play a differentiating game. Differentiator could be in terms of product or process or customer journeys. So I think that was one. Second was that technology today offers an opportunity to customize things and customize not only from a perspective of an end customer, but also from the perspective of various distributors, products, etc. So we said we'll go for massive customization, not one product fit all. And lastly, I think we said that it has to be backed by some exceptional service, not from an insurance or financial services perspective, but our NPS should be like best in class. We should be able to go on against some of the best companies across the world in any sector. So I think these were the three things. Our team and all of us initially spent a lot of time visiting insurance brokers, motor dealers, agents' offices, some new companies in the e-commerce sector, in the retail, in the travel, and studied in huge amount of detail as to what exactly are they facing in terms of their pain points. If they have to expand their business, and that was what our philosophy was, that how do we empower our partners so that they can actually expand their business and earn more. And I think the more we started getting into this, the more we realized that the opportunity in this to really follow what we thought is the right strategy is just immense. I think the second thing is that insurance is a very capital intensive sort of a business. So we were actually pretty clear that we'll start the company with the $100 million on day one. No insurance company actually in the last 17 years before us had started with such a high capital base. So the idea was you start with a good capital base. We had a solid team in the industry. In fact, we had an ex-CEO, colleague of mine who was also part of our company. So we had very, very experienced and a very solid team with us. And marketing, we actually recruited a team from e-commerce area because we felt that marketing the way financial services do is broken in a way. And then the third was to play that game of differentiation, having a very clear strategy. So, and as we started, I would say things just picked up from day zero. Obviously, some of the products, and maybe two products I can mention because they were very close to my heart and they never really worked. We actually thought that jewelry insurance is a great product to get into because we will be talking to women customers who typically don't talk on insurance. We had a tie-up with Tanishq, like the best brand one can think of. And we did a survey and everything, and a huge demand was foreseen. We came out with a great customer journey and everything, and it never sold off somehow. It never really picked up. And I would not get into the reasons why it didn't pick up, but on the other hand, I think we came out with this mobile insurance cover where we said we will be talking to this young generation for whom mobile is probably the most important asset they have. And that clicked. So I would say, I think in this journey, some products clicked. I would say most products clicked, some didn't. But the advantage was from day one. I think we just took off. And more importantly, not only this team of 8, 10 people in the head office, I think every single person we picked up, say as head of Delhi or head of some place in Gujarat or somewhere else. I think we were also very fortunate that we picked up maybe some of the best people in the field also. So these guys brought in their own credibility, whom some distribution partners were actually ready to back. And so in a way, we never really struggled. Is the echo
Okay.
coming now suddenly or what?
No, I think you're perfectly fine.
Okay, sorry. So in a way, we
Yes.
never really struggled. So I would say, I think if you look at any industry, if you look at FMCG, where you had some very, very large players, Patanjali came in from nowhere. And obviously became very big. Maybe last couple of years have been a bit tough for them. We had seen this similar thing about 30 years back, I think, when Nirma came in. So I think in every industry, if you think about, everyone thinks that the incumbents are very strong, but somebody can always come in, I would say. And really, if you look at Kotak Bank, has done amazingly well in the banking sector. 15 years back, I'm not sure how many people would have felt that Kotak would actually be the bank with the second highest market cap in the country. So I think people tend to overestimate, I would say this, and in financial services, especially, end of the day, it is brand is built by the people, and if the team is good, and if you have actually the distributors backing you, then there's absolutely no fear.
I think that is one key learning we are taking away from this session so far. That if you have the right team and you have the right strategy in place on product side and distribution side, it can be smooth sailing for you and you can grow and scale very quickly. And on this, we have, in fact, three questions on the team side. One is from Sharmili. She asks, how have you built the right team? And has the process changed for hiring the first 20 team members or the first 100 or the first 500? What is the journey of, the change in hiring patterns in the team?
So, Sharmili, great question. Very difficult, I would say, to answer in a way. So, I think initially, I would say we picked up a lot of people. I was conscious of my age, and we felt that if we really have to build Digit for a long term, so all our team members who are head of the departments in a way, most of them actually used to be, I would say, people whom I had picked up as management trainees in my previous organization or who had started their first job. So all these people had actually worked for about 12 to 15 years, were very bright people, as I knew, and also absolutely the right age. I think we spent a lot of time in picking up other people from outside the industry whom we didn't know. And once I would say I had hired this initial core team, then my role in hiring was actually over. And then I would leave it to these people to then build the team. And wherever they would want me to meet somebody, I would be more than happy to meet. But if they felt strongly, they would go ahead and I would say recruit. We always have at least 2 to 3 people in Digit meeting a person before we actually hire anyone at any level. So I think that is how we really went about. In terms of skills, we tried to do some experimentation, try to bring in people whom we felt would complement our skills, where at least somebody like me was completely zero. Marketing communications was, I think, one big area. And as you said, we picked up a great team who really continues to be with us, who is doing our marketing communications, direct to customer, sort of a marketing. So really lucky to have picked up a great team there. We tried to pick up people for customer service from outside insurance. That unfortunately didn't work because we realized that insurance is also a bit technical. But I think the culture which we wanted to bring in of having a great service, is something which I think a team continuously strives for. And lastly, I think what we did, which we couldn't do in the last 1 year, is that we would bring every single person who has joined Digit for a sort of a refresher course or introductory induction course to Bangalore, where we were in a way headquartered, to essentially talk about why Digit has started, what is the culture we have here, what is the values. We would not talk about technical stuff there, but essentially about culture. Last 1 year has been tough on that because we couldn't really do that. But I think now again, as the new financial year is starting, I think that is something which we'll do again, because we realize that values is what will take the organization really, really long, values and culture. Everything is temporary. Everything else is tactical.
Thank you, Kamesh. We also have questions related to, and you have already spoken about this, but maybe our audience wants you to go into more detail on this. Our audience, two people, Gaurav and Saurabh, they have similar questions. They want to understand what is the product strategy which Digit follows. What innovations have you been able to do on the product side, and how do you go about launching a new product?
Sure. So I think let me just pick up maybe two examples, one very simple, one slightly more complex. So I think we wanted to launch a product which would actually be absolutely be path breaking. And we said that we should target paying 10,000 claims out of that product in the first 6 months. So we picked up this travel insurance because in India, you would remember that 3-4 years back, it was the fastest growing airline market in the world. A lot of people were traveling. And we saw this travel insurance, which was becoming very popular. When we looked at the product, we felt that the product actually has been made in a way by incumbents that no claim can ever be paid. Just to give you one example, they would insurance companies would pay a claim of delay if the flight is delayed by 6 hours. When we looked at the data, and we actually bought flight data of 1 year, and when we looked at the data, we realized 0.05% of the flights are delayed. And we felt that, look, this is like daylight robbery in a way by insurance companies. So we launched a 75-minute delay cover, which basically meant that roughly 5%, 4% of the people who will have a policy will actually get a claim. Then what we did is further is to say, look, we know when people are taking a flight because that data comes to us from the travel aggregators. Sure. So we actually said, if we will track the flights in real time, if a flight is delayed, we will inform the customer and say, look, your flight is delayed beyond 75 minutes. You are eligible for a claim. Please click on this link, click a photo of your boarding card, send it to us, and we'll pay a claim. And when it started in the first 3-4 days, we had a lot of confusion in our call center because customers will call and say, look, who's Digit? You are insurance company, you are saying we have got a claim. So as an insurance company, you want to pay a claim. So people couldn't really relate to it at all. Sure. But I think as luck would have had it, our travel aggregator, our partner at that time, ClearTrip, they started seeing a higher uptake on the insurance product along with the ticket. So I think, and we could actually go to the town and say, look, people have been selling policies which are useless, ripping you off. And here is our product and here's our claims journey. And it just clicked, I think, on day one, and we realized that we are on a good track. Now, let me give a slightly complex example of health insurance. So when we wanted to launch health insurance, at that time, the idea was that the product is same. You can actually, for every age group, every income level, every family size, all you need to do is decide what sum insured you want to take. And we wanted to launch a product where, where we could actually say customize. So we launched a product where suppose youngsters say, look, I'm unlikely to fall ill, but youngsters could actually have accidents, bike driving one, for example. So we said, okay, you can go for a higher cover for accident insurance and go for a lower for illness. And huge amount of permutation and combinations we started with. Then later, obviously, last year in February, we became the first insurance company actually in the world to launch a Corona insurance health cover only for Corona. Now, this was very complex. I think I completely failed in underestimating the tech challenges which this will bring. Our product launch got delayed by 6 months because we were not able to get the tech right. But in this also, in each of the products which we launch, we actually call 15-year-old to our offices who look at this 2-pager which we send with every policy, where we say what is covered, what is not covered, and what you need to do at the time of claim. And this is written actually in a simple English. And the words, the sentences, all this actually get changed or vetted by 15-year-old, because the idea is to simplify insurance. So I think these are the ways we launch a product. So we take up every single product launch very, very seriously. A lot of research in terms of visits, as I said earlier, with the distributors and customers, then try and bring that differentiator, customization, and then we launch our product. So if you look at compared to say our earlier time in startup, we actually had launched every single product within 6 months. Now, in 3 years, we are still not launched almost products which give 40% of the premium. So the product introduction journey has become a lot more slow. System requirements have become very, very high. But I think the chances that a product will click, I would say, is higher now compared to what one would have otherwise foreseen.
Sure. And what would be your take if somebody comes and asks you about the distribution strategy which Digit follows and how it is different from the other people's distribution strategy?
So as I said, I think we started first of all to say, look, we have to be present at every stage wherever customer wants to buy, whether it's a bank or it's a motor dealer, it's an agent, it's a retail broker, it's an e-commerce site. So we are channel neutral. And our job is to actually ensure that our distribution partners, they can do things which can be done in a branch in an insurance company. So really, really move in the level of empowerment. So now some price flexibility to our partners based on whatever is legally permissible. In insurance, there are a lot of changes which happens in policies, which are called as endorsements. Somebody has misspelled a name, or GST number is wrong, or the address is wrong, or vehicle has changed. We were the first company which actually allowed partners to do these changes themselves. So I think from the partners' perspective, it has all been about empowerment and ease of system. I think our portals and our interfaces are seen by the partners as as the best. On Friday, actually, Brokers Association and brokers are like very professional, hardcore insurance distributors who distribute all insurance companies' products. Every year they come out with a survey. On an overall basis, Digit was actually ranked number 5, while from 1 to 10, all other companies would be at least 19-year-old. Digit is the only one in the top 10 who's less than 5 years old, or maybe less than 8 years old. So I would say, I think this journey continues. Every 6 months, we go for a massive survey to talk to our partners. I personally, if I look at the last week of December and first week of January, I have personally spoken to almost 400 of our own distributors, almost 20% of them on a one-to-one basis, to just have this feedback to say that, look, what is it that we can do, to help you grow your business and also obviously grow business with Digit. So I think our team, we continuously do that because all of us know that nobody's waiting when we launch now, as we used to say that nobody's waiting for a 27th general insurance company. So we should not take anything for granted.
We have one question which just came live to us from Garima. Garima's question is, since your insurance terms and conditions are not in a very legal terms, they are very simple to understand, don't you face legal risk because of this?
So, Garima, I would say, I think insurance companies across the world, they hide behind this legality and all of this because the intent is not clear and maybe they are not sure what they want to achieve. Having studied law formally, my sense is that if our intent is right, we should definitely try and do this, simplify. But what actually regulator did for us was to say, okay, you come out with this 2-pager, which is good. But the terms and policy conditions from a legal perspective per se would go by your policy terms and conditions. But I think from our side, we always are very conscious that whatever we have mentioned in our 2-pager is, we'll try and follow that. But I would say this issue of legality and all of that is significantly overhyped than what the reality is, because very, very few customers start the day by thinking, okay, let's try and cheat an insurance company. A lot of them do, and across the world. In fact, 20 years back, there was a survey carried out in US in 2000, where 57% of the people, I still remember, said that cheating an insurance company is not morally bad. So we live in that environment, but I think today technology, analytics, I think can try and reduce this. It can never ever be eliminated. But I think our experience on this has been great. In fact, a lot of people write to us and say, look, we love your policy. It is fun reading it. Previously, we never ever read insurance policy. And all these things, I would say, show, in a way, show us that we are on a good track. So we will double down on all this rather than have a fear of unknowns in a way.
Okay. I hope Garima got a very direct answer from Mr. Kamesh. We have a couple of questions related to starting for the first time. Shashank Shekhar wants to understand from you as to what advice you would give to a first-time entrepreneur.
So Shashank, I would say that no, I'm not a typical entrepreneur in a way that knows young, bright, tech savvy. I am like old, and our business insurance is more than 300 years old. And as Warren Buffett says, it's difficult to teach a young dog old tricks. So I'm an old dog who knows the old tricks. So my journey on being an entrepreneur has been very different, I would say, compared to others. As I said earlier, I didn't really have to go through any struggle. But I think there are 2-3 things which I must say, even in this journey, which is true and I have followed and which I can share for others. So one is that whatever idea you are starting with, develop some sort of execution plan. I think just having ideas is absolutely useless. When you have an execution plan and you are ready to do it for yourself, you're not ready to do it because you want to write on serial entrepreneur in your LinkedIn profile or on any other social media stuff like that. When you are ready to do this for yourself, maybe that is actually the time to start a new venture. The second is that are you willing to commit yourself to say, look, I'll keep this venture to myself all my life. I'm not going to sell. So for Fairfax, and I must say this, now I'm sharing this actually publicly for the first time, with Prem, when I was discussing, and I said, look, I want absolute freedom in terms of how you want to run the business. And he's anyway a great believer in that. And he says, what would you want to do after 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? So I said, if health permits, I'll continue to work. So he said that, would you agree for a 20-year lock-in? And this we are talking when I was 50 at that time. Lock-in means I would not sell shares for 20 years. And I said, yes, I will. So he says, write whatever freedom you want. He says, if you are committing your life for this venture, he said, no, I'll give you all the freedom. So try and build a venture to keep, not to sell. I think people really get, I would say, they start a venture and then they want to sell it as soon as possible. I think just try and keep building it forever. And lastly, I would say is that listen to your customers, listen to your partners. Don't listen to investors too much. Because the trouble with investors is they have flavors of the month or flavor of the year. Their flavor can change but your business cannot change overnight. So I would say this is really the advice I can give. People who believe in work-life balance, who believe that no one should not fail, uh, I would say these people should not get into this, because this is more or less a 24/7 sort of a um, passion which one has to have. And second is that you should really be ready to take a knock on your face, because things don't go the way you always plan. But in the end, it's also very satisfying and a very learning sort of an opportunity. And I think that is what makes this very exciting. But I again just want to say that my entrepreneurial journey has been like like a bed of roses in a way, because I didn't really have to struggle. Investors were there, team was there, so there was really nothing for me to do. So I think I have been very fortunate, I would say, from that perspective. So I'm very conscious of that. While I'm trying to preach, but I come from a very different. My starting point has been very different.
Thank you for sharing this answer and giving us your words of advice. We have one question related more to technology. Uh, there are 3, 4 different people. Ravi is there, Rahul is there, uh, and Meet Verma is also there. They want to understand what is your tech strategy, because they have read that you have solutions in AI and ML, and you have solutions in imaging by which you are trying to make sure that the
Yeah.
processes are faster or consumer journey is better. So can you give them some idea as to what you are trying to do?
Sure. So insurance actually, being a very regulated sort of a business, and it also has massive amount of, uh, I would say, data linked. Where it starts from generating a quote, taking a premium, accounting for that premium, giving it to reinsurers, commissions, then claims, and then you have to book it, and then you have to keep doing this for 10 years and keep a data for 10 years for a policy issued today. So it is very, very critical that your core system is very robust. I here again, I think I was fortunate that Allianz, as I said, largest group in the world, when I started this venture, they offered me their own proprietary system, Allianz Business System, to say, look, if you want, you can use this. So we took a core system, which I think is as good as any system in the world, maybe the best, I would say, as the core goes. More than $50 billion of premium is written on it in just general insurance. Secondly, I think we built huge amount of microservices from day one. I think before Digit started and sold its first policy, our data lake, all of that was already ready. Anything we start with, we actually are very clear as to what we want to track in terms of information. And information service standards are actually tracked on a real-time basis. So if you come and see our claims or our call center or our operations, you can see on a real-time basis what is pending and for how long and things like that. So that is how we try to build. We also try to invest on day one on all this, because when you talk about teaching images to actually say assess a loss in a car or in a two-wheeler, you have to feed minimum 25 to 30,000 photographs. You have to teach the engine that, look, this is a scooter, this is a motorcycle, this is a headlight. So you have to start with that, and then I think this is like taking a child from class 0 to class 5, and after that then child is on his own because the system is going into self-learning. So we started really investing in a big time. In the first 2 years, I would say 25% of our total strength was in the tech team. Again, now we are going for a massive tech investment. So I think here again, the idea was that we had somebody in our team, 3, 4, 5 people who had massive experience in all this area. So starting from scratch, and we felt that this is like, in India, we never had landlines and phones, and then we straight away moved to mobiles. So we felt in insurance, we have that opportunity that we can actually just leapfrog from others by actually going heavy on all this from day one. In these areas, I would say we start with an advantage rather than a disadvantage against the incumbents.
Thank you. Lakshay has just posted one question. He wants to understand can you differentiate between the life after FMS in corporate sector and life as an entrepreneur?
So Lakshay, actually, I have been very fortunate that I think as I started working with Allianz, I have always enjoyed huge amount of empowerment. And as you know, worked in life insurance, and as I said, worked in so many across sectors and geographies. And then I landed up in this job, which was my first ever in a functional role in Allianz head office, where I was head of performance management, planning and strategy for the entire Allianz group. And this was like going to a college every day, learning something new and getting paid for it. So I would say, I think, and when I was in New India, started in 1988, initially my posting in the first 4 years was actually in a branch which was doing huge amount of motor business. At that time, it was seen as, when I looked at my batchmates who were working in head offices and good functions, and here I was working in a motor branch, which was a lot of commercial vehicles. This was like very unsexy, and people will say, look, you're wasting your time here. But I think just working on the ground on 6-7 years, my ability to understand the business or look at a claim, maybe at today I probably would be maybe the only guy who can still go out and sell, who has actually sold insurance to customers, who has actually gone and seen a claim and can settle a claim, identify various parts of a vehicle and stuff like that. So I would say it in a way, working from the ground and then having the experience of setting up a startup earlier, and then having this cross-functional, cross-geography sort of exposure, and finally landing up in this role, as I said, in Munich. I would say every day has been a massive amount of learning. So today I would say, I think I'm continuously obviously looking for new ideas from others, especially now. I think I'm maybe reaching my own peak mentally. But I would say that this exposure now, when I look back, I feel that only God could have actually designed such sort of a path for me. I didn't really do anything. I think everything happened by mistake or by chance. All I have always done in life till now is that whenever there has been an opportunity to change in terms of role, geographies, cities, I have never really hesitated. And I just moved and took the next opportunity. I was doing really well in 2007 in general insurance when the sudden opportunity came in life at a very difficult time at that time. And I took that also and learned a lot about life insurance. So I would say life has not been different. The only difference has been now that I would say I can really do things now my way. And one of the things which we have done in Digit and which makes me very happy, I would say every day really drives me crazy, is to say that here now 600 people in Digit have ESOPs. We are maybe the only company in any sector in the last few years where every employee after 1 year becomes eligible for ESOPs. I think I would not have been able to pull this off if I was not in the position I am now today. But other than that, there is no real difference compared to what I have done previously and now. And the second, obviously, which I thoroughly enjoy, is that I don't attend any useless meetings, which previously I had to. So nowadays, I don't attend any meetings where I'm not required. So I would say these two are the real big differences in my life now.
Okay. Thank you, Kamesh. We have two questions which are similar. One is from Suvesh Sinha, one is from Jayesh Nima. They want to understand that if somebody is doing their first startup, and they're thinking, or they have one startup, but they're thinking of scaling their operations. So how do you check for scalability for startup ideas, and what all processes should a startup put in place so that they scale actually?
So great question, Subhesh and Jayesh. So one is that I think as we were building Digit in our mind, and all this sounds very presumptuous, but at that time, I must say that we always built for scale to say that, look, if we have to issue 50,000 policies a day, can our system cope with it? When you actually try a new product idea, you have to take it to a minimum stage where you can actually go out and sell. If it clicks, great. If it doesn't, you can withdraw it. So basic idea is that don't wait too long to test your idea. I think a lot of times we invent a problem which actually doesn't exist. So if you feel your idea has merit, so go and talk to a few people and say, look, I'm thinking about this. Would you be willing to do this? So for example, with Tanishq, and I must compliment them that they had no idea who Digit was. They knew none of us, but they continuously, right from the CEO, CFO, head of sales, all of them met very encouraging, and they were ready to go and say, look, no, we are ready to go out and test this, or Clear Trip for travel, or some of our partners for motor insurance. So you have to really go and test an idea, and if nobody is buying it, maybe you have to drop it. And secondly, if you wait too long and test, and if it fails, then you have wasted huge amount of time. So try and go for a proof of concept kind of a testing, and then you should be prepared to scale it up. Again, another example I can give is when we started with this COVID health insurance, we introduced the product on 27th Feb. 22nd March was a lockdown. And this product was under sandbox, so we had limitations as to how many policies we can sell. And then in April, we said, look, this product is finished already. We need to come out with a new one. In a complete lockdown situation, we came out with the product, the process. And this time when everyone was sitting separately in their homes, we are not sitting together. And we prepared for a process or operations where we say we'll get maybe 200, 300 policies. In the first month, we had 2,200 policies. Our system collapsed. But within 2-3 weeks, our team really worked very hard and put this all back. And then I think it just took off. And then we actually covered 22 lakh people. Half of the people who went for Corona insurance cover in the country are insured by Digit. Then we could actually, a system could really, pick up the scales. So I think scalability is very important because you don't know what will click when. But I think going for proof of test concept and going out and actually doing it is also very important, because if it's too late, then I think if you fail, then there's no chance of you to get up again.
Sure. So talking to customers, talking to partners, time is of essence, and proof of concept. I think Jayesh and Suvesh have definitely got a lot to think about from this. Another question which has been sent by a number of people, there's a long list, so I'm not taking their names. They want to understand from you, how is InsurTech changing across the globe? What trends do you see which are driving these changes? And which pain points are still not being addressed for the customers?
So I would say, I think InsurTech is, in a way, the biggest driver of this has been the capital. I think the amount of capital which is coming into this sector, fintech as a whole, including InsurTech, is just huge. So when such amount of capital really flows in, then the risk appetite and the experimentation appetite of people dramatically goes up. So that, I think, has been one big change. The second, I would say, has been that because of the sheer size of financial institutions, large ones, any change is very difficult there in terms of technology or processes, etc. Because it's not easy in a highly regulated industry. You have data for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. So how do you really handle all of that and move to a new system? So I think that is what encourages InsurTech companies to say, let's pick up. So one company picked up, say, renters insurance first in US, and then trying to go into home insurance. In China, one company picked up this return insurance because e-commerce is huge in China, and the return is paid by the customer, not by the e-commerce companies. So they focused on that. Someone like Digit is focused on traditional products also. So on one side, we try and innovate on travel or gadgets and things like that, but we also try and do traditional lines of business, which is fire and motor, which are responsible for almost 80% of the profit pools of the industry. So I think there's a huge amount of scope still to try and new stuff. So I would say ease of capital, easy availability, and secondly, incumbents by nature are slow to change, and more so in a highly regulated financial services industry. And these institutions and companies have seen a lot of crisis in the last 20 years. 9/11, financial crisis, then 2020, Corona led. So their own risk appetite in a downward interest rate scenario and continuous crisis every 10 years, their own appetite is a bit less, and that is what drives more and more money to the insurtech sector.
Thank you, Kamesh. Since our time is limited, I am taking up one more question. This revolves around your advice for startups which are trying to raise funds. And what would be your advice for somebody who's going to maybe a seed round? And how does the process change as they keep moving ahead? Which are the important criteria which is clear there, and what gets more weightage in later rounds? Question is from Rohan.
Sure. So Rohan, as I said earlier, I started from a very different sort of a round here, because I said, starting with $100 million on day one, day zero. So very difficult for me to really answer. I don't think I'm qualified to answer that. But what I'll say is that one, try and raise less cash and define the milestone. That, okay, I need so much money, and with this money, I will actually be able to develop the prototype. Then in the next round, go and say, look, now I have the prototype of the proof of concept. Now I want to go for some market testing. Now for this, I need so much of cash. So try and raise less capital, but maybe more frequently. The advantage of this is that if one is able to stick to the discipline and continue to deliver, I think you will be diluting less and less with every round. So you get to keep more of your company. The risk always in this is that if you're not doing well, then you will not be able to raise the next round, which actually is not bad, because if it has to fail, then it's better that you know it early than you know it later. So that is the only advice I can give, but I'll still like to say that I'm really the wrong guy to advise on this, because I didn't really struggle for this at all. And after our first round of 135 million from Fairfax, the next round we brought in private equity players. So I think suddenly, for someone like me, I was working in this sector where it was never considered sexy, insurance. Now I'm told that general insurance, especially, is the sexiest sector to work in. So it has been quite a journey from that perspective.
In fact, we have one question related to this. It's from Mr. S.K. Sethi. Mr. Sethi wants to has a question which says, youngsters do not wish to join in the insurance industry. How to change this poor perception? Have you also faced this?
No, so I think Mr. Sethi comes from the insurance background. I know him.
Yes.
So as I said, I think if you look at, and I know you and Nitin both come from the investment banking background, but I'll still take the liberty of saying it. If you look at the financial services, investment banking is seen as the sexiest. If you look at last 20 years, I don't think there's any industry which has caused more economic losses other than maybe COVID to the world's economy. If you look at asset management, which again is seen as a very sexy industry, all of us know that more than 80% of the asset managers are not able to beat the benchmark, but it never strikes them that the arrogance and the money, whatever they have, is actually coming from a subpar performance. On the other hand, if you look at an insurance industry, as I said, whether you have floods, whether you have bushfire in California, whether you have COVID now coming, any disaster wherever happens, after the government, it's actually the insurance industry which comes up and foots the bill. I would say, going back to my almost 33 years in this industry, and as I said, no, I've also briefly worked in asset management industry. I would say is that people make the most difference here in this sector, and you can actually deliver a good work. You can be valuable to the society, and still have a huge amount of learning. So any youngster today, and I tell this to my children also, that if they feel they are good, then maybe this is a sector to be in, and your conscience will be very clear. You will sleep well. You might not have that, as I said, no sexiness in your profession, which is changing, at least in Asia, quite a lot. But in the end, doesn't really matter. I would say better to work where you can make a difference, make an impact, and know that what you're doing has a positive impact on the society.
Thank you. I'll try and take last question if you allow.
Sure, please.
So it is from Advaitya. Advaitya wants to have your views on, should a startup be chasing growth or profitability, and which strategy works for which kind of startups?
So this is like if we were 10-year-old or 15-year-old and somebody says, do you want to gain height or do you want to gain weight? What would you choose? So life is about both. End of the day, I think all of us in business try and, I would say, balance both growth as well as profitability. Capital in today's world is much more easily available than it was 10 years back. So what it basically means is that maybe you can push back a bit the profitability horizon. The challenge always is in a bad time that capital could actually just vanish, availability. So what one has to do at all the times is to really be clear as to when this company would actually achieve a break even, or the startup, and how do you really define success. So if you have an agreement with your investors, okay, look, this is how we are going to measure and define success of this company, then that is what you have to follow. But again, I think just quoting Warren Buffett, you would not have heard of a company which is profitable, which goes bankrupt. But a lot of loss-making companies do, and they go bankrupt. So business has to be profitable for survival. Now, whether it is medium term and how long is the medium term, I think all that depends on the time, sector, and the appetite of the investors.
I think we are almost reaching to the end of the time slot which we had seeked from you. Thanks a lot for giving us time. May I request Professor Singla to come in and share a vote of thanks? Singla, sir?
I'm there. I'm there.
Sir, we are not able to see you.
Oh,
Yes, we can see you now.
you can see me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Wonderful. I think it was a wonderful lesson in entrepreneurship and also in how to do business. Couple of things that which are takeaways for me at least. Have a great team, best people in their respective fields.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. You must know the business inside out. Only then you can do something wonderful. Create a difference, make a difference to the lives of people, to the lives of your customers. It may mean massive customization and exceptional service levels. There's no replacement for excellence. Values and culture is never going to go out of date. Fantastic. And an organization, an entrepreneur has to be much ahead of the competition, and you have to think out of the box. Do things which your competition doesn't do. An entrepreneur must have an execution plan, scalability, and should be willing to slog 24/7. I think these are some of the lessons which I have taken them very seriously. And what Kamesh said, if it has to fail, it's better that we get to know it earlier. And it's better that it happens fast. So I'm sure all our audience, all our attendees have learned as much as I have learned. Thank you very much, Kamesh, for giving us some wonderful insights into the life of an entrepreneurship. I'm sure the people who have, some ideas about getting into an entrepreneurship, profession, I'm sure they will be much better educated after today. And if they need some more advice, I'm sure they'll be able to connect with you sometime. We are once again grateful to you for agreeing to spend some time with us. Thank you very much. And we love to have you on the FMS building sometime whenever the COVID allows us to make it happen. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Johib, for, like always, hosting this particular session. And we're also grateful to Dheeraj and Nitin for putting in all the efforts to put together this particular show. Professor Anand joined very, very briefly. I think he got logged out and he doesn't know how to connect back. That's a problem. I'm
We'll share the
sure.
recording with him.
हाँ, वो उनका प्रॉब्लम है because थोड़ा आईसाइट का भी है, थोड़ा एज का भी है, थोड़ा टेक्नोलॉजी का भी है. But he has sent a message saying hi to Kamesh, and I'll convey your greetings to him, Kamesh. Thank you very much. And we are particularly grateful to all the people who attended the session and spent their time with us. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.